All right, friends, the last video from this chapter. So, age structure, how does that affect populations, both growth and decline? So let's take a look at these. So when we look at the age structure within a population, we break it into three major categories: pre-reproductive, reproductive, post-reproductive. So the number of people younger than age 15 is a major contributing factor to populations and how they're going to be once they get to reproductive age. And so pre-reproductive, that section of 14 or less, is an indicator of the future of any particular population, as it would make sense. And managing post-reproductive people has a lot of economic and social impacts on the population as well. So it's important to take in consideration both of these groups, as well as the main group of people that are reproducing at the time, and how that is going to quickly affect the population in a specific place. But understanding all three of those really matters, and it's important to have that idea. So from 14 to 45 is this reproductive zone in here, and understanding what's happening before and after it matters in the big picture of things. And so it affects both economics, social, and environmental impacts long term. And governments and organizations have to keep that in mind when they do their planning. So, as I alluded to already in the previous thing, when we talk about age structure, there's those three categories. Again, pre-reproductive is you can't reproduce yet. Reproductive is you're reproducing. Post-reproductive is you're too old to reproduce, of course. And so, how does it affect things? Well, young populations can grow very, very quickly. Old populations decrease over a longer period of time. And even age distributions will result in a constant population size. And so we'll look at these in the coming slide here. And so when you look at an age structure diagram, and you get this kind of true pyramiding kind of effect, where we have a lot of pre-reproductive, which is what our red section is here. When you have a lot of that, you have a expanding, rapidly increasing population. So this is an indication that the population in these countries here is going to grow quickly. And so Guatemala, Nigeria, and Saudi Arabia are all examples of this type of thing. As the pyramid gets skinnier, the population slows down, but it's still growing. So the United States, Australia, and China are examples of all countries that the population is growing, but it's not growing as fast as this wide base over here. Once you get to the part where the youth section in the reproducing group, it almost creates a straight upward, almost box right here, with a trickle down it as people age. This is a very stable country. It's where the population is going to stay about the same. Italy and Greece are examples of that. Japan is actually going to slide over into this category more than likely over time. And then you get this inverted pyramid look that's happening here, and then it's got a rounded top, but the inverted part here at the bottom is an indication that the populations in these countries are getting smaller, like Russia and Germany. So the basic general structure of these diagrams gives us an indication of what a population will do over time. So when we break that down, the United States kind of looks at that and looks at how that stuff's laid out, and then they categorize countries based on the general setup, how industrialized they are, what their gross domestic product is, and that's what's laid out in this picture here. And you can see advanced countries are in purple, so you see in the United States, Europe, Japan, and then Australia and New Zealand down there. Countries that are in red are really low developed countries, orange, less developed countries. And when you look at this idea of GDP and industrialization, and you look at the age structure pyramids, you find that those developing countries, the orange and reds, most of them have this wide pyramid scheme to how they're set up. And most of the developed countries, the purples and the blues, have more of a structure diagram like this, that has much more of a stabilized population. And so there's a direct correlation between developing countries and their population growth versus a developed country and its. And so 28% of the population is under the age of 15 in the world. And so they're not reproducing yet. But we're predicting on how they're going to do that in the future. Are they going to have 2 kids, 4 kids, 1 kid? And trying to make guesses at what they're going to do in the future. But they're not of reproductive age yet, almost a third of the world. Of that 28%, 30% of those come from this type of pyramid. Only 17 come from this type of pyramid. And so you can see that the majority of those kids that aren't reproducing yet are from countries that suggest that they're going to have lots of babies. And so that's why we know that the population is going to grow significantly over the next period of time. And then as these populations move through these pyramids, we have to understand the impacts of those. And so the baby boomers are a good example of that. Baby boomers born after World War II, when the GIs came back, there was a huge population surge. And so when they were born, in this first pyramid that they're represented in the yellow, there was a huge chunk of them. And so that was back in 1955. As you moved up, say 30 years down the line, the baby boomers moved into this midsection. So we went from kids needing preschools and elementary schools to people now in the workforce and handling jobs and that kind of thing. And so the goods and services these groups of people needed changed vastly in those 30 years. And our country had to adapt to more jobs available for them here and part of the workforce here and schools and stuff over here. And now they're in this category. They're ending their cycle in the world of jobs and providing more money to the economy, and they're working their way into retirement. And as they work their way into retirement, we will be getting an ever-aged population of people that we're going to have to take care of. Back here when the baby boomers started, this group of people was taking care of a very small number of people up here. Lots of people paying for very little people when it comes to Social Security and stuff. And now look at that balance. The weight is evenly distributed potentially by 2035. And Social Security and stuff will have issues trying to maintain and pay for an ever-growing population of people in their retired years. And so big concern for us as we move forward in the United States. Now, about 14% of the world's population lives in countries with stabilized or declining populations. So these are countries that the populations aren't growing anymore. They're kind of stabilizing or they're shrinking. And so we have a lot, 14% of the world's population is quite a few. And so what effect is that going to have on the big scheme of things? So if that happens, if that decline happens slowly, it's something that we can handle. It's something that we can make adjustments to. Because if it happens over several decades, then we can make adjustments and build and adjust what we need to adjust to make that happen. But if that population declines rapidly, and it changes dramatically, those populations do, it creates all kinds of economic and social problems around the world. And so we need to try to create changes in population, but to do it at a rate in which we can handle those adjustments so that we can account for what we need to account for. So populations made up mostly of older people usually have a tendency to decline very rapidly. And that puts all kinds of issues on a country's budget because older people use a lot of medical care and Social Security and a lot of public services that need to be paid for. And so we need to understand how we're going to take care of those people and what we're going to do with a huge population of those. And so here are just some of those problems. So make sure you read through those. This is a little side note, a one-slide little setup, just to quickly explain other things that affect the population. So death by AIDS was a huge thing in 2008. We're actually shrinking it. We're going through the whole red thing right now. There was a concert on TV the other night about it, and so we're making lots of pushes to help this AIDS number out a little bit. But in 2008, 25 million people died of AIDS, and it had those huge impacts of lots of people dying are creating real issues around the world. The normal population distribution in Africa is a pyramid like this. But what we're doing is we're having lots of people that are in their reproductive years getting AIDS and dying. And what it's doing is it's taking the center of that pyramid and it's cutting it out. And so you might have a population in Africa that looks like this, where there's no people in this middle section. So think of that from an economic point of view and from a family structure point of view. So you might be being raised in your youth by your grandparents. They might be old and retired and can't take care of you, so we have kids raising kids. We don't have any of the people in the center here that are supposed to be doing jobs and maintaining economics. That's all being cut out. And so this young adult thing, you're losing all your productive workers, and it's really creating economic turmoil and creating some real problems. And so there's a concerted effort around the world that really kind of help out this AIDS epidemic, because it is potentially going to create huge problems around the globe. But an understanding of how to manage that can really be helpful in this situation. Okay, that's it for that section. I got one more section. I apologize. We'll take care of that next time.